This is Democracy Watch. So Mark, just when you thought things couldn't get worse for Trump hanger-on and newly minted coffee salesman Rudy Giuliani, he was just hit with more bad news in D.C. What just happened to Rudy here?
So the D.C. Board of Professional Responsibility, which is a board of the High Court in the District of Columbia, recommended that he be disbarred. So this is very close to the end of the road here in D.C. for him.
So this is a recommendation for disbarment, but who makes the ultimate decision here?
Okay, so as I mentioned, this is a board that is controlled by what's called the D.C. Court of Appeals, which is not to be confused with the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. This is actually the court that oversees the District of Columbia and oversees lawyer admissions and disbarments. So basically, their handpicked board unanimously recommended that Rudy Giuliani be disbarred, and I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen.
Now, if he's disbarred in D.C., does that trigger some automatic bar disqualification in other states?
Look, Rudy Giuliani's got a lot of problems when it comes to his bar. I mean, let's not underestimate his problems. His problems have only exacerbated with the bar based on this D.C. thing. But remember, he was suspended on an emergency basis from the New York bar a couple of years ago, right? So he's had a lot of bar issues. Plus, getting indicted is not good for the bar. So just to keep everyone clear, what he's being disbarred for in D.C. has to do with his conduct in 2020 in the Pennsylvania litigation, where he wanted to basically disenfranchise hundreds of thousands of people in Pennsylvania. But Brian, his situation has gotten substantially worse since then.
Right.
So yeah, this is going to be a recommendation to the High Court in D.C. But I think it's fair to say Rudy Giuliani is getting disbarred in Washington, D.C.
Now, I guess more broadly here, just in the entire justice system, how do you have confidence that the same hacks who have infiltrated Republican legal circles, and the judicial establishment there won't also pervade the Bar Association? A lot of these, groups of people seemed like they would be above the fray when it came to getting infiltrated by these right-wing hacks, and yet look at the situation that we're in right now. Everything from the RNC to the Supreme Court itself. So how do we ensure the purity of the bar?
Yeah, look, I think you are raising a really important question, because in 2016 people would have said, well, the courts will never be infiltrated, and of course, we've seen problems in the judiciary. They would have said that lawyers would never go along with an insurrection, and we've seen that. So I don't want to say that it is not possible. I will say that it is not currently the case. Right, so Trumpism can eventually take over these bar associations, but so far the bars can be faulted, and I do fault them for moving too slow, for being too deliberate, for not being as aggressive as they need to be. But I don't think the end result is going to land in Rudy Giuliani's face in this case. The D.C. Court of Appeals is going to accept this recommendation. He's going to be disbarred in D.C. There will be reciprocity in other jurisdictions. In other words, when you get disbarred one place, it's reportable to other bars. And so, I think that Rudy Giuliani's days of practicing law are over. But I do think, though, it speaks to a larger question of why was there a culture in the legal community as a whole that a whole lot of lawyers, because it's not just Rudy Giuliani, it's John Eastman, it's Jenna Ellis, it's lawyers in Michigan, it's lawyers in Arizona, it's lawyers in Pennsylvania. There's a lot for the bar to answer for in why there was a culture that people thought it was okay. I think that they are learning their lessons now, but I agree with you that if Donald Trump gets elected, he will do anything, including corrupt the process. And I think that you have to give the criminal defense bar the most leeway, because they are defending people who are accused of crimes, and I think that is appropriate. But look, I think you can really legitimately ask questions about some of the conduct of some of Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyers, and whether or not they strayed up to that line or across it, and whether they are trying to desensitize some of this conduct, particularly around the gag orders.
Right. I mean, there's a difference between defending criminal defendants who, may have committed some heinous crimes, and the lawyers themselves committing crimes against democracy. There's a big difference there. You had mentioned Democracy Docket. This, of course, when we have any information on Rudy Giuliani being disbarred, you'll hear that first in Democracy Docket. So if you're not yet signed up, please make sure to sign up. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Mark, to your point there, Jenna Ellis's license was suspended. John Eastman's license was suspended. Soon Giuliani's is going to be suspended. Do you think that's going to have any impact on current Trump attorneys? Or do you think that they just don't care, and their proximity to what they perceive as power is just going to be enough to supersede any allegiance they might have to, their oath or the bar?
Yeah, this is one of the most surprising things, and it should be distressing and disturbing to everyone. In 2020, Donald Trump got, as you point out, a bunch of hanger-ons, right? Rudy Giuliani, it is clear, was well past his prime, to put it mildly. Jenna Ellis, I think, was a parking ticket lawyer of some sort. Even if you look at, John Eastman was like a fringe think tank guy. Even if you look at remember the impeachment lawyers? Like the impeachment lawyers, people were laughing about.
Showing.
Yeah, like what's interesting is that you would have thought that in 2024, the quality of lawyering would go down, right? Like people would be more likely to flee Donald Trump. But he continues to attract more and more establishment Republican lawyers. Look at who he tried to bring into the RNC. Now, he wound up running one of them out, but they were the establishment Republican lawyers. Look at his criminal defense team. He has on his criminal defense team former prosecutors, people who, were at big law firms. So I think that you have to understand Trump's relationship to the bar and Trumpism as a movement in the bar the same way that you have to understand it in the rest of society. In the beginning, it was fringe figures who were attracted to him, and most of the establishment was repelled. Now the establishment is all in with him. The senators are all in with him. The so-called moderate senators and members of Congress are all in with him, and the lawyers are. They're all in with him. The Republican Party has become a death cult for Donald Trump, and anyone who considers themselves part of the Republican Party now seems to have thrown in with Donald Trump.
And that's why I asked if you were worried about the rot pervading the bar, because, if it's become so normalized on the right, is there going to come a point where there are going to be too many members? I don't know how lawyers identify in terms of political affiliation, or whether there's, the majority are Democrat or the majority are Republican, but if it becomes so normalized within the GOP, that's why I worry about that rot pervading the bar, then pervading the entire legal establishment, because that's just kind of how it is. It just becomes a litmus test issue for Republicans, that you just accept the fact that we're going to be completely anti-democracy.
Yeah, look, like I said, that has not happened so far. We have to give credit where credit is due. These disbarments are going forward, but it is a real concern. What will happen? What traditionally happens is if someone gets disbarred one place, they get, like I said, there's reciprocity, and then the other bars look at it and say, that's the thing. In fact, one of the courts that I'm sure Rudy Giuliani is admitted to is the U.S. Supreme Court. And usually the U.S. Supreme Court, they get a report that someone's been disbarred someplace, and then they get disbarred in the U.S. Supreme Court. And I'm picking on the U.S. Supreme Court a little bit here, but, whatever, right? What happens if you start to have in some of these places where you would express reciprocity, either the bars or the local courts being like, oh, no, actually, I kind of liked that.
Right. But yeah, something definitely to keep an eye on, and we will. So for those watching right now, if you want to stay on top of this stuff, please make sure to subscribe. I'll also put the link to Democracy Docket right here on the screen, and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.